Hello, dear friends, and welcome to Sleep Stories TV. The stars gleam above weaving tales of cosmic battles and divine destinies. Tonight we dive deeper into our Greek mythology series with Titanomachy, the war that forged the gods. The heavens quake as Zeus and his siblings challenge the mighty Titans. Cronus's tyranny faces its reckoning, and the world trembles in the clash of gods. If you haven't subscribed to Sleep Stories TV, join us now. Hit that bell and let no tale pass you by. Now settle in and let's journey into the myth where rebellion roars and a new age is born. In his secret refuge, Zeus had come of age, no longer a hidden child, but a young god with the will of a brewing storm burning in his eyes. Tucked away in the shadowed caves of Mount Ida, far from the watchful gaze of his father Cronus, the Titan king, Zeus had grown strong under the care of nymphs and the divine she-goat Amalthea. The air around him crackled with restless energy, as if the very mountains sensed the power stirring within him. His heart, once a flicker of divine spark, now pulsed with the ferocity of a thunderstorm. Each beat a call to destiny. The tales of his mother Rhea, whispered to him in the cradle of his infancy, echoed in his mind, tales of betrayal of a father who devoured his own children to cling to a throne built on fear. Cronus, the mighty Titan, who had overthrown his own father. Uranos now ruled the cosmos with an iron grip, his paranoia a dark cloud over the heavens. Yet Zeus, hidden from his father's wrath, had survived. He was the last of Rhea's children, spared the fate of his siblings, who languished within the cavernous prison of their father's belly. The weight of their suffering pressed against Zeus's soul, a constant reminder of the injustice that defined his birthright. The cave where Zeus stood was no longer a sanctuary, but a forge where his resolve was tempered. His eyes, glowing like twin bolts of lightning, surveyed the rugged peaks beyond, as if measuring the distance to Mount Othrys, the Titan stronghold. The time for hiding had passed. The world, vast and ancient, groaned under the rule of the Titans, their dominion unchallenged since the dawn of creation. But Zeus felt the stirrings of rebellion, a fire kindled not just by vengeance, but by a vision of a new order, one where gods could rule with justice rather than tyranny. His muscles, taut with divine strength, flexed as he gripped the edge of a jagged rock, his thoughts racing like storm clouds across a restless sky. He was no mere mortal bound by flesh and fear. He was a god born to reshape the cosmos. Yet he knew the path ahead was fraught with peril. Cronus was no ordinary foe. His power was vast, his cruelty unmatched, and his allies, the other Titans, were beings of unimaginable might. The thought of facing them alone sent a shiver through the air, but Zeus's heart did not falter. He was not alone, not entirely. The whispers of prophecy carried on the wind by the ancient Earth Mother Gaia spoke of his destiny. A child would rise, they said, to undo the Titan's reign. Zeus stepped out from the cave, the cool mountain air brushing against his skin, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Below, the world stretched out in a tapestry of valleys and rivers, a realm that knew neither the freedom nor the chaos he would soon unleash. His mind turned to his siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, trapped within Cronus, their divine essences stifled but not extinguished. They were his kin, his allies, if only he could reach them. The thought of their suffering fueled his resolve, each image of their imprisonment, a spark that fed the inferno of his purpose. He could almost hear their voices, faint but unbroken, calling out from the depths of their father's form. To free them would be to ignite a war, a conflict that would shake the heavens and rend the earth. Yet Zeus was unafraid. His youth, far from being a weakness, was his strength, a fire that burned brighter than the ancient cold power of the Titans. He was the storm, the lightning, the inevitable force that would break the chains of the old world. The nymphs who had raised him, their faces lined with both pride and fear, gathered at the cave's mouth, their eyes reflecting the glow of his divine presence. They had taught him the secrets of the wild, the strength of the earth, the rhythm of the stars. But now their lessons were complete. Zeus turned to them, his voice low but resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. "The time has come," he said, his words carrying the weight of fate. "I will not let my father's shadow darken the world any longer." The nymphs bowed their silence, a testament to the gravity of the moment. Amalthea, her golden horns glinting in the dim light, let out a soft bleat as if blessing his departure. Zeus's gaze lifted to the horizon, where the peaks of Mount Othrys loomed a challenge and a promise. The Titans ruled from their golden halls, their power absolute, their arrogance blinding them to the storm gathering in the heart of a young god. As he descended the mountain, each step a declaration of intent, Zeus felt the world shift beneath him. The earth itself seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, as if Gaia herself stirred in anticipation. The rivers sang of rebellion, the winds whispered of change, and the stars above burned brighter, as if aligning for the war to come. Zeus's thoughts were not of victory, not yet, but of the first step, a step that would require not just strength, but cunning. He could not face Cronus alone, not yet. His siblings, the gods who shared his blood and his burden, were the key. Their freedom would be the spark that lit the fire of war. And so, with the will of a storm and the heart of a god, Zeus set his sights on the first act of his rebellion, to outwit the Titan king, to free his kin, and to begin the great Titanomachy that would reshape the cosmos forever. The world held its breath, waiting for the first strike of lightning. The first step in his plan was not a direct assault, but an act that required cunning. He had to free the brothers and sisters still imprisoned within their own father's body. Zeus, now a god in the fullness of his power, stood at the edge of Mount Ida, his gaze fixed on the distant golden halls of Mount Othrys, where Cronus ruled with unyielding authority. The air around him hummed with the weight of his purpose, the world itself seeming to lean in as if eager to witness the audacity of his scheme. To challenge the Titan king head-on would be folly. Cronus was a colossus of divine might, his paranoia matched only by his strength. Zeus knew that brute force alone would not suffice. His siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, languished within the dark prison of their father's form, swallowed at birth, to prevent the prophecy that foretold his downfall. Their freedom was the key to igniting the rebellion, but to free them required a plan as intricate as the threads of fate woven by the Moirai themselves. Zeus's mind, sharp as a lightning strike, turned to the art of deception, a weapon as potent as any thunderbolt. In the quiet of his refuge, Zeus sought counsel from one whose wisdom rivaled the ancient powers of the cosmos. Metis, the goddess of cunning and strategy. Her presence was like a cool breeze in the heat of his resolve, her eyes gleaming with the spark of ingenuity. Metis, daughter of the Titans. Oceanus and Tethys had no love for Cronus's tyranny, and her loyalty to Zeus was as steadfast as the earth itself. Together they devised a plan, one that would strike at the heart of Cronus's power without raising his suspicion. Metis, with her knowledge of herbs and potions, spoke of a draught, a concoction so potent it could unsettle even the iron constitution of a Titan. A potion. She said, her voice soft, but laced with steel, that will force Cronus to expel what he has consumed, to undo the act that has kept him king. Zeus listened, his heart pounding with the audacity of it. The plan was perilous, requiring him to infiltrate the very court of the Titans, to stand before his father not as a son, but as a stranger cloaked in guile. The preparation of the potion was a ritual in itself, conducted under the starlit canopy of the Cretan night. Metis moved with purpose, her hands deft as she gathered rare herbs from the slopes of Mount Ida mandrake root, steeped in the dew of the moon, and bitter asphodel plucked from the edges of the underworld's rivers. She whispered incantations, her voice weaving spells that bound the ingredients into a brew of divine potency. Zeus watched his admiration for her growing with each precise movement. The potion, when complete, shimmered with an unnatural light, its surface rippling as if alive with the promise of upheaval. Metis handed him the vial, her gaze steady. "This is your weapon," she said, "but you must deliver it yourself." Cronus trusts no one, but a cupbearer, humble and unassuming, might slip beneath his notice. Zeus nodded, the weight of the vial in his hand, a reminder of the delicate balance between success and catastrophe. To approach Cronus, to stand in the shadow of the Titan king, was to dance on the edge of oblivion. Zeus disguised himself, shedding the radiance of his divinity for the guise of a mortal servant. His golden hair was dulled, his stormy eyes softened, his towering frame humbled into the stoop of a lowly cupbearer. The transformation was more than physical. It was a surrender of pride, a willingness to play the part of the insignificant to achieve the monumental. With the vial concealed within his robes, Zeus made his way to Mount Othrys, the journey long and fraught with the whispers of doubt. The Titan's court was a place of opulence and dread, its halls carved from living stone, its air thick with the scent of ambrosia and the weight of ancient power. Cronus sat upon a throne of obsidian, his eyes like twin voids scanning the world for threats. The other Titans, Hyperion, Iapetus, Creus, and their kin lounged in their divine splendor, their laughter echoing like thunder. Zeus moved among them, invisible in his humility, his heart a drumbeat of purpose. He poured wine, bowed low, and waited for the moment when Cronus's goblet would need refilling. The court was alive with feasting, the Titans reveling in their unchallenged dominion. Zeus watched his father, noting the lines of suspicion etched into Cronus's face, the way his hand never strayed far from the sickle that had once felled Uranos. Yet even a king must drink, and when Cronus's goblet ran dry, Zeus stepped forward, his movements fluid, his expression blank. The vial's contents were poured into the wine, the potion blending seamlessly with the dark liquid. Zeus offered the goblet with a bow, his eyes averted, his breath held. Cronus took it without a glance, his attention fixed on some distant concern. The moment the Titan drank, Zeus felt the world shift, as if the very axis of the cosmos tilted. The potion worked swiftly, its power coursing through Cronus's divine form. Zeus stepped back, his heart racing, knowing that the next moments would either birth a rebellion or end in his destruction. The court fell silent, the Titans unaware of the storm about to break. The transition from Zeus's solitary resolve on Mount Ida to this moment of daring infiltration was seamless, a testament to his growing mastery of both courage and cunning. As he stood in the shadow of his father's throne, the vial's work begun, Zeus knew that the next act would be one of upheaval, of gods reborn from the belly of a tyrant. The air grew heavy, the stars above Othrys dimming, as if in anticipation. The rebellion sparked in the quiet of a mountain cave was now poised to erupt in the heart of the Titan's court, setting the stage for the great war that would follow. Under the guise of a royal cupbearer, Zeus offered his father Cronus the medicated draught, and soon the Titan king buckled, seized by a great cosmic convulsion. The golden halls of Mount Othrys, resplendent with the glow of ambrosial torches, seemed to dim as the potion took hold, its power a silent thunder coursing through the Titan's veins. Zeus stood poised, his mortal disguise cloaking the storm within him, his eyes fixed on Cronus's towering form. The Titan king, his obsidian throne a monument to his unchallenged reign, clutched the goblet tightly, unaware of the treachery within its contents. The court, a cacophony of laughter and boasts from titans like Hyperion and Iapetus, fell into an uneasy hush, as if the very air sensed the shift in fate. Cronus's face stern and unyielding as the mountains contorted suddenly, his eyes widening with a flicker of confusion. The potion crafted by the cunning Métis was no mere poison, it was a force of divine upheaval designed to undo the monstrous act that had defined Cronus's rule, the devouring of his children. Zeus stepped back, his heart pounding like a war drum, knowing the moment of truth had arrived. The first sign was a tremor, a ripple through Cronus's massive form that sent a shudder through the stone beneath his throne. The Titans, their senses dulled by millennia of unchallenged power, barely noticed their goblets raised in mid-toast. But Zeus saw it, the tightening of Cronus's jaw, the sudden grip of his hand on the sickle at his side. Then, with a sound like the cracking of the earth itself, Cronus doubled over, a groan escaping his lips that echoed like a collapsing mountain. The court froze, the air thick with sudden dread. Zeus, his guise still holding, moved to the shadows, his breath shallow, his eyes never leaving his father. The potion worked its magic, a cosmic unraveling that reached into the depths of Cronus's being. His body, a prison for divine siblings, could no longer contain the forces within. The Titan king's form shimmered, as if the boundaries of his divinity were fraying, and then, with a retching heave that shook the heavens, he began to expel what he had swallowed long ago. First came the stone, the cunning substitute Rhea had used to save Zeus, wrapped in swaddling clothes, and swallowed by Cronus in his paranoia. It fell to the floor with a dull thud, rolling across the polished stone, its surface unmarred by the Titan's inner darkness. The court gasped, murmurs rising like a tide. The Titans, their faces a mixture of confusion and unease, leaned forward, their eyes darting between the stone and their king. But Cronus was not done. The potion's power surged, and with another convulsion, he retched again, his body racked by forces beyond his control. From his mouth emerged Hestia, goddess of the hearth, her form radiant yet gentle, her eyes blazing with quiet strength as she stepped into the world for the first time in eons. The court reeled, the Titans' voices rising in alarm, but Cronus could not stop. One by one, his children emerged, each a god in full power, their divine essences untouched by their imprisonment. Demeter followed her presence like the breath of spring, her golden hair flowing like fields of ripened wheat. Hera came next, her regal bearing. Unbroken, her eyes flashing with defiance as she surveyed the court that had never known her name. Hades emerged, his form cloaked in shadow, his gaze piercing the very soul of the cosmos, a silent promise of dominion over the unseen. Poseidon was last his arrival, heralded by a surge of power that sent ripples through the air, as if the seas themselves stirred in his presence. The five gods stood together, their forms towering yet graceful, their eyes locking onto Zeus, who shed his disguise in a burst of divine light. The cupbearer was gone. In his place stood the storm god, his presence a challenge to the Titan king. The court erupted in chaos, Titans rising from their seats, their voices a storm of outrage and fear. Cronus, weakened but still formidable, struggled to his feet, his sickle gleaming with malevolent intent. Zeus stepped forward, his voice cutting through the din like a thunderclap. "Father," he said, the word dripping with both reverence and defiance, "your time is over." The siblings, united for the first time, stood shoulder to shoulder, their combined power, a force that made the very foundations of Othrys tremble. Hestia's warmth steadied them. Demeter's strength grounded them. Hera's resolve sharpened them. Hades' shadow shielded them, and Poseidon's fury surged within them. Zeus, their leader, felt the weight of their trust, their shared pain, and their unyielding will to reclaim their birthright. The Titans, for all their might, faltered in the face of this new alliance, their confidence shaken by the gods who had emerged from their king's betrayal. Cronus, his eyes burning with rage, raised his sickle, but the gesture lacked its former certainty. The potion had not just freed his children, it had cracked the foundation of his rule. The hall, once a bastion of Titan supremacy, now felt like a battleground, waiting to erupt. Zeus and his siblings did not linger. With a glance that spoke of unspoken plans, they retreated from Othrys, their forms vanishing into the night, like stars swallowed by a storm. Behind them, the Titans roared, their voices a mix of fury and disbelief, but the seeds of war had been sown. Zeus led his siblings to the peaks of Mount Olympus, a new stronghold, where they could gather their strength and prepare for the conflict to come. The air on Olympus was sharp, alive with the promise of rebellion. And as the siblings stood together, their eyes turned to the horizon where Othrys loomed. The act of freeing his kin had been a triumph of cunning, but Zeus knew it was only the beginning. The Titanomachy, the great war of the gods, was now inevitable, its first spark lit by a potion and a god's unyielding will. For the first time, the 6 Olympian siblings stood together, an alliance forged in shared tragedy, and they jointly declared war on their father's regime. On the windswept peaks of Mount Olympus, far from the golden halls of Othrys, Zeus and his siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon had gathered under a sky heavy with the promise of storm. The air was crisp, charged with the energy of their newfound unity, each god, a pillar of divine power tempered by years of imprisonment within Cronus's dark confines. Zeus stood at the forefront, his eyes blazing like lightning, his voice a rumble that seemed to shake the very clouds. "We are no longer shadows," he declared, his words carrying the weight of prophecy. "We are the gods of a new age, and we will not bow to the tyranny of our father." His siblings nodded, their faces etched with determination, their shared suffering a bond stronger than any chain. The memory of their release from Cronus's belly still lingered, a visceral reminder of the betrayal that had defined their existence. Now free and whole, they stood as one, their resolve a beacon that pierced the twilight. Olympus itself seemed to rise in their presence, its jagged peaks a natural fortress, its heights kissed by the stars. Hestia, her warmth a quiet strength, kindled a sacred fire at the heart of their gathering, its flames a symbol of the home they would fight to create. Demeter, her presence as steady as the earth, spoke of the fields and rivers that would flourish under their rule, a world free from fear. Hera, her gaze sharp and unyielding, vowed to forge a divine order where loyalty and honor would prevail. Hades, cloaked in shadow, spoke little, but his silence carried the weight of the underworld, a realm he already claimed as his own. Poseidon, his voice like the roar of the sea, swore to unleash the tides against their foes, his anger a force as boundless as the oceans. Zeus listened, his heart swelling with pride, knowing that each sibling brought a unique strength to their cause. Together, they were a constellation of power, a force that could challenge the ancient might of the Titans. Yet the declaration of war was no mere formality. It was a call that reverberated across the cosmos, a challenge that could not be undone. From Olympus, the siblings sent their defiance to Othrys, their voices carried on the wind, a proclamation that reached the ears of Cronus and his Titan kin. The Titan king, still reeling from the betrayal of the potion, roared in fury, his sickle gleaming as he rallied his forces. On Mount Othrys, the Titans gathered Hyperion, whose light burned with the fire of the sun, Iapetus, the father of cunning and strength, Creus, whose presence was as unyielding as the stars, and Oceanus, whose rivers encircled the world. They were joined by others, their names echoing with the weight of primordial power, Coeus, Phoebe, Themis, and Mnemosyne. Even Rhea, mother to the Olympians, stood apart, torn between her love for her children and her bond with Cronus. The Titans' court, once a place of revelry, now bristled with the tension of war, its halls filled with the clash of bronze and the murmurs of strategy. The Olympians, though fewer in number, were not without allies. The nymphs of Mount Ida, who had sheltered Zeus in his youth, pledged their loyalty, their knowledge of the wilds, a subtle but vital strength. Themis, a Titaness, who saw the justice in the Olympians' cause, defected to their side, her wisdom a guiding light. Metis, ever cunning, worked tirelessly to weave strategies that would counter the Titans' brute force. Zeus, standing atop Olympus, surveyed the world below, knowing that the war would not be won by numbers alone. The Titans were vast, their power rooted in the ancient bones of the cosmos, but the Olympians were driven by something deeper, a fire born of betrayal, a hunger for a world unshackled from fear. Zeus turned to his siblings, his voice steady but urgent. "We fight not just for ourselves," he said, "but for the future, for a cosmos where no god must live in chains." The declaration set the stage for the Titanomachy, a war that would span a decade and reshape the heavens. The Olympians fortified Olympus, its peaks wreathed in mist, its slopes a labyrinth of stone and shadow. They trained their powers honed in the crucible of their shared purpose. Poseidon's trident, though not yet forged, seemed to stir in his hands a promise of the sea's might. Hades's presence darkened the air, a reminder of the underworld's silent power. Hera's strategies sharpened their plans, while Demeter's connection to the earth grounded their resolve. Hestia's fire burned at the heart of their camp, a constant reminder of the home they sought to build. Zeus, their leader, was the storm itself, his presence a rallying cry that echoed across the peaks. Across the plains on Mount Othrys, the Titans prepared as well, their forces vast and unyielding, their confidence unshaken by the audacity of the younger gods. The world below, caught between these two divine strongholds, trembled in anticipation. The rivers ran swift, the winds howled, and the earth itself seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of war. Mortals, though few and scattered, whispered of the gods' conflict, their lives shaped by the tremors of divine wrath. The Titanomachy had begun not with a clash of arms, but with a declaration that split the heavens. Zeus and his siblings stood on Olympus, their eyes fixed on Othrys, knowing that the war would test their strength, their unity, and their vision for a new world. The fire of Hestia's hearth burned brighter, a beacon in the gathering storm, as the Olympians prepared to face their father's regime in a conflict that would echo through the ages. For 10 long years, the war raged, a brutal and devastating stalemate between two divine generations, where neither side could gain the upper hand. The cosmos itself seemed to groan under the weight of the Titanomachy, as Mount Olympus and Mount Othrys stood as opposing fortresses, their peaks shrouded in the smoke of divine conflict. The earth trembled, its rivers running red with the ichor of gods, while the skies churned with storms that mirrored the fury of the battling deities. Zeus led the Olympians with a fire that never wavered, his voice a thunderclap, that rallied his siblings through the chaos. Hestia's hearth burned ceaselessly on Olympus, a beacon of hope amidst the carnage, while Demeter's touch kept the fields alive, sustaining their resolve. Hera's strategies wove intricate plans, her eyes ever fixed on the horizon where Othrys loomed. Hades, cloaked in shadow, struck from the edges of the battlefield, his presence a chilling reminder of the stakes. Poseidon's wrath shook the seas, sending waves crashing against the Titan strongholds, yet even his might could not break their defenses. The Olympians fought with a ferocity born of their shared suffering. Their unity, a strength the Titans could not match, yet the ancient powers of Cronus and his kin proved unyielding. On Mount Othrys, the Titans stood as colossi of the old world, their power rooted in the primordial forces of creation. Cronus, his sickle gleaming with cruel intent, led with a paranoia that fueled his strength, his every strike a reminder of the prophecy he sought to defy. Hyperion's light burned like a second sun, scorching the earth where the Olympians stood. Iapetus, the spear of the Titans, fought with a cunning that matched his sons, Prometheus and Atlas, his blows precise and devastating. Oceanus unleashed rivers that flooded the plains, while Creus and Coeus wielded the stars themselves, their cosmic might, bending the heavens to their will, the Titanesses. Phoebe, Themis, and Mnemosyne lent their wisdom and power, their voices weaving spells that countered the Olympians' assaults. The world below, caught in the crossfire, suffered as mountains crumbled and forests burned, the mortal realm a mere afterthought in the clash of gods. Yet for all their might, the Titans could not crush the Olympians, whose youth and passion burned brighter with each passing year. The battles were cataclysmic, each clash a symphony of destruction that reshaped the cosmos. On the plains between Olympus and Othrys, the gods and Titans met in thunderous combat, their powers colliding in bursts of light and shadow. Zeus hurled bolts of raw energy, his storms tearing through Titan ranks, yet Cronus countered with waves of temporal force, slowing the Olympians' advance. Poseidon's earthquakes split the earth, swallowing Titan warriors, but Oceanus's floods rose to meet them, turning battlefields into churning seas. Hades wove through the fray, his shadow strikes felling Titans before they could react. Yet Iapetus's cunning traps ensnared him time and again. Hera's commands kept the Olympians coordinated, her voice cutting through the chaos, while Demeter's vines entangled Titan forces, only for Hyperion's flames to burn them away. Hestia, though she did not fight, held the heart of Olympus, her fire a constant reminder of the home they sought to build. The war was a dance of equals, each side matched in power, neither able to claim victory. The stalemate wore on year after year, the cosmos locked in a cycle of creation and destruction. The Olympians, though young, grew in skill, their powers honed by the crucible of war. Zeus's storms became more precise, his lightning a scalpel that carved through Titan defenses. Poseidon's mastery of the seas grew his waves a relentless tide that eroded Othrys's foundations. Hades learned to wield his shadows like a blade, striking fear into even the mightiest Titans. Hera's strategies evolved her plans, anticipating Titan movements with uncanny accuracy. Demeter's connection to the earth deepened her power, sustaining the Olympians through the long years of conflict. Yet the Titans, ancient and vast, were unshakable, their experience a wall that the Olympians could not breach. Cronus's paranoia drove him to new heights of ferocity, his sickle a blur that felled any who dared approach. The other Titans, bound by loyalty and fear, fought with a unity that matched the Olympians' their power, a reminder of the world they had shaped. The mortal world, though distant, felt the war's ripples. Villages crumbled under falling stars, rivers changed course, and the seasons faltered as Demeter's focus turned to battle. Mortals whispered of the gods' wrath, their prayers rising to both Olympus and Othrys, unsure which side would prevail. The Olympians, though, fighting for a new order, could not spare a thought for the mortals below their focus, consumed by the war. The Titans, indifferent to mortal suffering, saw the earth as a battlefield, its resources theirs to command. The stalemate was a wound on the cosmos, a conflict that threatened to tear the world apart without resolution. Zeus, standing atop Olympus, surveyed the scarred landscape, his heart heavy with the cost of their struggle. He knew that passion alone would not win the war. They needed an edge, a power to tip the balance. The fire in Hestia's hearth flickered, as if echoing his thoughts, a reminder that hope still burned. As the 10th year dawned, the war showed no sign of ending, the heavens locked in a brutal equilibrium. Zeus gathered his siblings, their faces lined with the weight of a decade's fight, yet their eyes still burned with defiance. "We are not defeated," Zeus said, his voice a low rumble that steadied their resolve. "But we must find a way to break this deadlock." The Olympians nodded, their unity unbroken, their purpose clear. The war had forged them into a force to rival the Titans, but it had also revealed the limits of their power. The cosmos waited, its breath held for the moment that would shift the tide. The fire of Olympus burned on a promise that the stalemate would not last forever, setting the stage for the intervention that would change the course of the Titanomachy. As the war fell into a deadlock, Gaia, the Earth Mother, once again intervened in the fate of her descendants with a decisive prophecy. The Titanomachy, now in its 10th year, had scarred the cosmos, leaving the earth cracked and the heavens bruised, with neither Olympians nor Titans able to claim dominance. On Mount Olympus, Zeus stood with his siblings, their faces etched with the weariness of endless battle, yet their resolve unbroken. The fire of Hestia's hearth flickered in the center of their camp, its warmth a fragile anchor in the storm of war. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of scorched earth and the distant rumble of Titan forces regrouping on Mount Othrys. Zeus's eyes, stormy and unyielding, scanned the horizon, searching for a path to victory that had eluded them for a decade. The stalemate was a chain binding both sides in a cycle of destruction that threatened to consume the world. It was in this moment of quiet despair that the ground beneath Olympus trembled, not with the violence of war, but with the stirring of something ancient, something vast. Gaia, the primordial mother of all, had awakened her presence, a pulse that rippled through the mountains and valleys, calling her grandson to listen. The Olympians gathered their senses, sharpened by the earth's sudden stirring. The air grew warm, the wind carrying a whisper that was both voice and vibration, as if the stones themselves spoke. Gaia's form did not appear, for she was the earth itself, her voice the rustle of leaves, her breath the sigh of shifting tectonic plates. Zeus, she intoned her words, resonating in the bones of the gods. The war cannot be won by strength alone. The Titans, my children, are rooted in the old ways, their power vast but rigid. You, child of the new age, must seek allies older still, forgotten in the depths of time. The Olympians exchanged glances, their minds racing. Zeus stepped forward, his voice steady but reverent. "Speak, grandmother," he said, "and guide us." Gaia's response was a vision, a prophecy that unfolded in the minds of the gods like a tapestry woven from the threads of creation. She spoke of the Cyclopes, the one-eyed smiths of divine craftsmanship, and the Hecatoncheires, the hundred-handed giants, both imprisoned in the abyss of Tartarus by their father Uranos and guarded by Cronus's cruelty. The weight of Gaia's words settled over the Olympians like a mantle. The Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges were beings of primal power, their forges said to have shaped the very bones of the cosmos. The Hecatoncheires, Cotus, Briareus, and Gaius were forces of chaos, their 100 hands capable of wielding destruction on a scale that dwarfed even the Titans' might. These were Zeus's uncles kin to both Olympians and Titans, yet cast into the underworld's deepest pit to rot in eternal darkness. Cronus, in his paranoia, had left them there, fearing their power, even as he sat upon his throne. Gaia's prophecy was clear. To break the stalemate, Zeus must free these ancient allies, harnessing their strength to tip the scales of war. The task was daunting, for Tartarus was no mere prison. It was a realm of torment, a void where light and hope perished. Yet Zeus's heart burned with the fire of possibility, his resolve strengthened by the Earth Mother's guidance. The Olympians listened as Gaia's voice faded, her presence lingering in the trembling earth. Zeus turned to his siblings, their faces a mixture of awe and determination. "This is our path," he said, his voice a low rumble that echoed the storms he wielded. "The Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires are our kin, bound by the same chains of tyranny that once held you. Their freedom will be our strength." Hera, her eyes sharp with calculation, nodded, already weaving strategies to incorporate such allies. Poseidon's fists clenched, the promise of new power stirring the seas within him. Hades, ever silent, tilted his head, as if hearing the whispers of Tartarus already. Demeter's hand rested on the earth, a silent communion with Gaia's will, while Hestia's fire flared brighter, a sign of hope renewed. The Olympians, though weary, felt a surge of purpose, their unity fortified by the prophecy that offered a way forward. The journey to Tartarus would be Zeus's alone, for the abyss was a place no god could enter lightly. The Olympians prepared their brother, their trust in him absolute. Metis, ever cunning, offered counsel, her words a map through the dangers of the underworld. "Tartarus is guarded by Campe. A creature of nightmare," she warned, her voice steady but grave. "Her strength rivals that of the Titans, and her loyalty to Cronus is unbroken. You must face her, Zeus, and you must not falter." Zeus nodded, his eyes blazing with the storm that defined him. He stood at the edge of Olympus, the wind whipping his cloak, the weight of the prophecy settling into his bones. The war had tested them all, but this task was his alone, a trial of courage and leadership that would define the future of their rebellion. The earth trembled once more, as if Gaia herself urged him forward, her ancient power a reminder of the stakes. As Zeus prepared to descend, the Olympians fortified Olympus, their resolve hardened by the promise of new allies. The fire of Hestia's hearth burned steadily, a beacon that would guide Zeus back from the abyss. The stalemate of the Titanomachy, a wound that had bled the cosmos for a decade, was poised to break. Gaia's prophecy had lit a spark, a hope that the forgotten powers of Tartarus could shift the balance. The heavens watched, the earth listened, and the Olympians stood ready, their eyes fixed on their brother as he prepared to face the darkness. The war, once locked in endless struggle, now teetered on the edge of transformation, its fate resting in the hands of a young god and the ancient allies he would awaken. Without hesitation, Zeus undertook the most perilous journey, descending alone into the abyss of Tartarus to release its primeval captive powers. The peaks of Mount Olympus faded behind him, their misty heights replaced by a darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ancient stone and the faint echo of despair that clung to the underworld's edge. Zeus, his form radiant yet resolute, stood at the precipice of a chasm that yawned like the maw of some forgotten beast. His siblings' faces lingered in his mind, Hestia's quiet strength, Hera's unyielding gaze, Poseidon's restless fury, Hades's shadowed resolve, and Demeter's grounding presence. Their trust was a mantle he carried, a weight that steadied his steps as he faced the void. Gaia's prophecy had set him on this path, her words a beacon. In the gathering dark, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, imprisoned by Uranos and guarded by Cronus's cruelty, were the key to breaking the Titanomachy's stalemate. Zeus's heart, a storm of courage and purpose, beat with the rhythm of a god who knew the cosmos hung in the balance. The descent into Tartarus was no mere journey. It was a plunge into the heart of creation's shadow. The path wound through jagged cliffs, their edges sharp as betrayal, their surfaces slick with the dew of despair. The air grew colder, the silence deeper, broken only by the distant wail of tormented souls and the drip of unseen waters. Zeus moved with the grace of a storm, his steps sure, despite the darkness that pressed against him. His divine light, though dimmed to avoid detection, flickered like a star in the void, a reminder of the power he carried. The underworld was a realm of opposites, where time stretched and contracted, where the boundaries of existence blurred. Tartarus was not just a prison, but a wound in the cosmos, a place where hope was crushed beneath the weight of eternity. Yet Zeus did not falter. His purpose was a flame that burned brighter in the face of such desolation, his will a lightning bolt that pierced the gloom. As he descended deeper, the presence of Campe, the monstrous jailer of Tartarus, loomed like a storm on the horizon. Metis's warning echoed in his mind, a creature of nightmare loyal to Cronus, whose strength rivaled the Titans themselves. The air grew thick with her presence, a miasma of malice that clung to the stones. Zeus's senses sharpened, his body tensing, as the darkness parted to reveal her form. Campe was a horror born of chaos, her serpentine tail coiling through the shadows, her eyes glowing like twin furnaces. Her body, a grotesque fusion of beast and deity, bristled with scales that shimmered like polished obsidian, and her claws raked the air with a sound like tearing metal. She stood before the gates of Tartarus, a barrier of living terror, her voice a hiss that carried the weight of eons. "Who dares approach the prison of the forgotten?" she snarled, her gaze locking onto Zeus. "Turn back or join them in their chains." Zeus stepped forward, his disguise shed his divine form, blazing with the fury of a storm. "I am Zeus, son of Rhea, and I come to free my kin," he declared, his voice a thunderclap that shook the cavern. Campe's laughter was a grating screech, her tail lashing as she lunged, her claws aimed for his heart. But Zeus was no mortal, nor was he a titan bound by the old ways. He moved like lightning, his body a blur as he dodged her strike, the air crackling with his power. The battle was swift and brutal, a clash of divine forces that sent shockwaves through the underworld. Campe's strength was immense, her blows shaking the very foundations of Tartarus. But Zeus's agility and cunning were unmatched. He struck with precision, his hands weaving storms that battered her defenses, his eyes burning with the fire of destiny. With a final surge of power, he unleashed a bolt of raw energy, a precursor to the Thunderbolt he would later wield, and Campe fell, her form dissolving into the shadows from which she came. The gates of Tartarus loomed before him, their chains forged in the fires of creation, their weight a testament to the fear that had bound the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires. Zeus approached, his hands steady, as he grasped the chains, their cold biting into his divine flesh. With a surge of strength, he tore them apart, the sound of shattering metal echoing like a war cry. The gates swung open, revealing the abyss within, where the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires waited. The Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges emerged first, their single eyes glowing with the fire of their forges, their massive forms, radiating gratitude and resolve. Behind them came the Hecatoncheires, Cotus Briareus, and Gaius, their 100 hands flexing their presence, a storm of chaos barely contained. Nephew Briareus rumbled his voice like the grinding of mountains. You have freed us, and for that we are yours. Zeus met their gazes, his heart swelling with the weight of their allegiance. The journey back to the surface was a triumph, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires following Zeus like a tide of primal power. The underworld trembled at their passage, the shadows retreating before their combined might. As they emerged into the light of the world, above the air sang with the promise of change. Zeus led them to Olympus, where his siblings waited, their eyes widening at the sight of their ancient kin. The fire of Hestia's hearth flared, a welcome to the allies who would shift the tide of war. The Titanomachy, so long a stalemate, now stood on the brink of transformation, the forgotten powers of Tartarus ready to join the fight. Zeus's descent had been a trial, his victory over Campe, a testament to his leadership, and the liberation of his uncles, a spark that would ignite the final phase of the war. To repay their nephew for their freedom, the Cyclopes, the master smiths of the universe, forged 3 artifacts that would reshape the balance of power. On the slopes of Mount Olympus, where the air shimmered with the heat of Hestia's sacred fire, the Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges set to work, their single eyes gleaming with the intensity of creation. The cavern they chose as their forge echoed with the clang of divine hammers, the roar of flames that burned hotter than the sun, and the rhythmic pulse of the earth itself, as if Gaia rejoiced in their labor. Zeus stood nearby, his siblings gathered around him, their faces lit with anticipation. The liberation from Tartarus had been a triumph, but the Cyclopes' gift would be the spark that turned the tide of the Titanomachy. The air was thick with the scent of molten metal, and the electric charge of destiny, each strike of the Cyclopes' hammers, a promise of victory. The Olympians, battle-worn from a decade of stalemate, felt the weight of hope, their eyes fixed on the forge where the tools of their rebellion were being born. The Cyclopes were no mere craftsmen. They were architects of the cosmos, their hands having shaped the mountains and stars in the dawn of time. Imprisoned by Uranos and left to rot by Cronus, their gratitude to Zeus was as vast as their skill. Brontes, whose name meant thunder, worked with a ferocity that shook the cavern, his hammer striking sparks that danced like miniature storms. Steropes, the lightning, wove energy into the metal, his eye glowing with the brilliance of a captured bolt. Arges, the bright, tempered the artifacts with a precision that made the heavens hum, his hands steady as the constellations. Together they labored their unity, a mirror of the Olympians' own, their purpose singular to arm the young gods against the titans who had chained them. The forge blazed its light, casting long shadows across the slopes of Olympus, a beacon that rivaled the fire of Hestia's hearth. The siblings watched in silence, their breaths held, knowing that these artifacts would define the next phase of their war. The first artifact was for Zeus, the storm god, whose leadership had brought them this far. Brontes stepped forward, his massive form dwarfing the Olympians, and presented the Thunderbolt, a weapon of pure, unbridled power. Its shaft crackled with energy, its tip glowing with the fury of 1,000 storms. Zeus took it in his hands, feeling its weight not just of metal, but of destiny. The Thunderbolt was more than a weapon. It was an extension of his will, a force that could split the heavens and shatter the earth. He raised it, and the sky above Olympus roared, clouds gathering as if answering his call. Lightning arced across the peaks, a promise of the destruction he would unleash. The Olympians cheered their voices, a chorus of defiance, but Zeus's eyes remained fixed on the weapon, his heart swelling with the responsibility it carried. With this, he could face Cronus not as a son, but as a god destined to rule. For Poseidon, Steropes crafted the Trident, a three-pronged spear that hummed with the power of the seas. Its tines gleamed like polished coral, their edges sharp enough to cleave mountains. When Poseidon grasped it, the ground trembled, and the distant roar of waves echoed through the mountains as if the oceans themselves bowed to his command. The trident was a symbol of his dominion, a tool to wield the tides and shake the earth's foundations. Poseidon's eyes, fierce and restless, gleamed with a hunger for battle, his grip tightening as he felt the weapon's power surge through him. The Olympians felt the air grow heavy with moisture, the promise of floods and quakes that would drown the Titan ranks. Poseidon's laughter, deep and resonant, rolled like thunder, a sign that the seas were ready to join the war. To Hades, Argus presented the Helm of Darkness, a sleek, shadowy artifact that seemed to drink the light around it. When Hades donned it, his form shimmered, fading into a veil of shadow that made him nearly invisible, a specter of death and mystery. The helm was not just concealment, but a power to strike fear, to move unseen through the battlefield, a weapon for the god who would claim the underworld. Hades' silence was unbroken, but his eyes burned with a quiet intensity, a promise that the Titans would know fear before the end. The Olympians felt a chill, not of cold, but of the underworld's presence, a reminder that Hades' power would be as vital as his brothers. The helm completed the trio of artifacts, each a masterpiece that balanced the others, a testament to the Cyclopes' skill and the Olympians' unity. The forging of these weapons was a turning point, a moment when the stalemate of the Titanomachy began to crack. The Cyclopes, their task complete, bowed to Zeus, their gratitude a bond that would endure beyond the war. "These are our gifts," Brontes rumbled, his voice like the grind of stone. "Use them to end the tyranny that bound us." Zeus knotted his grip on the Thunderbolt, tightening his heart, a storm of resolve. The Olympians gathered around Hestia's fire, their spirits lifted by the power now in their hands. Hera's strategies began to shift, incorporating the new weapons into their plans. Demeter's connection to the earth pulsed stronger, as if Gaia herself approved. The fire burned brighter, its flames reflecting the light of the Thunderbolt, the gleam of the Trident, and the shadow of the helm. The war, so long a deadlock, now stood on the edge of upheaval, the Olympians armed with tools that could challenge the Titans' ancient might. The transition from Zeus's perilous journey into Tartarus to this moment of creation was seamless, the liberation of the Cyclopes bearing fruit in the forge's fire. The Olympians, once equal to the Titans in power, but not in advantage, now held the means to shift the balance. The air on Olympus crackled with anticipation, the weapons a promise of the battles to come. Zeus raised the Thunderbolt, its light illuminating his siblings' faces, and spoke, his voice steady and commanding. "With these we will end the war," he said. "The Titans will fall, and a new age will rise." The Olympians roared their agreement, their unity a force as potent as the artifacts they wielded. The stage was set for the Hecatoncheires to join the fray, their chaos ready to complement the Cyclopes' gifts as the Titanomachy hurtled toward its climax. Simultaneously, the Hecatoncheires, the hundred-handed giants, joined the battle, creating a cataclysmic storm of earth and rock by hurling hundreds of giant boulders at once. The plains between Mount Olympus and Mount Othrys, already scarred from a decade of divine warfare, trembled under the weight of their arrival. Cottus Briareus and Gaius, freed from the chains of Tartarus by Zeus's daring, emerged as titans of chaos, their massive forms looming like living mountains. Each bore 50 heads and 100 arms, their hands grasping boulders torn from the earth's core, their eyes burning with a fury that had festered through eons of imprisonment. The Olympians, newly armed with the Cyclopes' gifts, the Thunderbolt, the Trident, and the Helm of Darkness, stood ready on Olympus, their resolve bolstered by the sight of their colossal allies. Zeus raised his Thunderbolt, its light cutting through the gathering dusk, a signal to unleash the full might of their rebellion. The air crackled with anticipation, the ground pulsing, as if Gaia herself stirred to witness the upheaval. For the first time in the Titanomachy, the Titans on Othrys felt a tremor of fear, their golden halls quaking as the Hecatoncheires advanced. The battlefield erupted into chaos as the Hecatoncheires unleashed their power. With a roar that shook the heavens, Briareus hurled a barrage of boulders, each the size of a hill, their flight a deafening storm that blotted out the sky. Cronus followed his 100 hands, working in unison, sending a cascade of rock that tore through Titan ranks like a divine avalanche. Gaia's his movements a whirlwind of destruction, uprooted entire cliffs, launching them with a force that cracked the earth itself. The Titans, accustomed to their own vast power, faltered under this onslaught, their formations crumbling as boulders rained down, shattering their defenses. Hyperion's blinding light dimmed as dust clouds rose, choking the air. Oceanus's rivers surged to meet the assault, but the sheer volume of stone overwhelmed his floods, turning his waters to mud. Cronus, his sickle raised, roared defiance, but even his voice was drowned by the thunderous impact of the Hecatoncheires' attack. The Titans, for all their ancient might, had never faced such raw, unbridled chaos. The Olympians seized the moment, their new weapons amplifying their assault. Zeus Jing Fong, the Thunderbolt, blazing in his hand, stood atop a ridge, hurling bolts of lightning that illuminated the battlefield in searing flashes. Each strike was a declaration of war, igniting the sky and shattering Titan strongholds. Poseidon, wielding the Trident, struck the earth, sending quakes that split the ground beneath the Titan's feet, the tremors amplified by the Hecatoncheires' barrage. Hades, cloaked in the Helm of Darkness, moved unseen through the fray, his shadow strikes sowing terror among the Titan ranks. Hera's commands rang out her voice, a beacon that guided the Olympians through the chaos, her strategies weaving their powers into a unified assault. Demeter's vines surged from the broken earth, entangling Titan warriors, while Hestia's presence, though distant, fueled their resolve with the warmth of her sacred fire. The combined might of the Olympians and their new allies was a storm unlike any the Titans had faced, a force that shook the foundations of their rule. The Hecatoncheires' onslaught was relentless, their 100-handed fury a nightmare born from the depths of Tartarus. Each boulder they hurled was a weapon of chaos, their trajectories unpredictable, their impact devastating. The Titans, once unassailable, scrambled to counter this new threat. Iapetus, the spear of the Titans, rallied his forces, his cunning directing counterattacks that faltered against the giants' sheer power. Creus and Coeus wove spells to deflect the boulders, but the Hecatoncheires' strength was overwhelming, their hands moving faster than the eye could follow. The Titanesses, Phoebe and Manamazani, chanted incantations to bolster their kin, but the magic faltered under the weight of the giant's assault. Even Cronus, his sickle flashing like-reed in fury, stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The chaos was palpable, the Titan's confidence shaken for the first time in millennia. The battlefield was a maelstrom, the air thick with dust and the screams of wounded gods. The Hecatoncheires, their forms towering over the fray, moved with a relentless rhythm, each arm a blur of motion as they tore stone from the earth and sent it crashing toward Othrys. Zeus stood at the forefront, his Thunderbolt a blazing symbol of leadership, directing the Olympians' movements with a precision honed by years of war. Poseidon's Trident struck the ground, sending shockwaves that destabilized Titan formations, while Hades's helm rendered him a phantom striking fear into their hearts. Hera's voice cut through the din, her commands sharp and unyielding, while Demeter's power pulsed through the earth, binding the Titans in their own defenses. The Hecatoncheires were the key their chaos, the turning point that Gaia's prophecy had foretold their power, a force that even the Titans could not withstand. The transition from the Cyclopes' forge to this moment of cataclysmic battle was seamless, the Olympians' new weapons and allies transforming the war's momentum. The Hecatoncheires' arrival was a thunderclap, their presence a harbinger of the Titans' faltering dominion. The Olympians, their spirits lifted by the Cyclopes' gifts, now wielded the power to challenge the old order, their unity a flame that burned brighter with each strike. The battlefield, once a stalemate, now tilted in their favor, the Hecatoncheires' boulders, a storm that broke the Titans' resolve. The cosmos watched its breath held as the Olympians pressed their advantage, their eyes fixed on the horizon where victory awaited. Armed with divine weapons and backed by unstoppable allies, the Olympians launched a final, all-out assault, turning the sky into a sea of fire and lightning. The plains between Mount Olympus and Mount Othrys, scarred from a decade of war, became the stage for a cataclysm that would reshape the cosmos. Zeus stood at the forefront, his thunderbolt blazing in his hand, its light a beacon that rallied his siblings and their colossal allies, the Hecatoncheires. The air crackled with the energy of their combined might, the ground trembling as if Gaia herself urged them forward. Poseidon, his trident, gleaming summoned waves that surged across the battlefield, while Hades, cloaked in the Helm of Darkness, moved like a shadow, striking fear into the Titan ranks. Hera's voice, sharp and commanding, wove their forces into a seamless assault, her strategies honed to perfection. Demeter's power pulsed through the earth, her vines and roots ensnaring Titan warriors, while Hestia's hearth, burning bright on Olympus, fueled their resolve with its unyielding warmth. The Hecatoncheires, Cottus Briareus, and Gaias loomed like living mountains, their 100 hands hurling boulders that tore through the air, a storm of stone that shook the foundations of Othrys. The Titans, once unassailable, now faced a force unlike any they had known. Cronus, his sickle flashing with desperate fury, rallied his kin, but the cracks in their unity were evident. Hyperion's light, once a blinding force, flickered under the onslaught of Zeus's lightning, the sky erupting in flames that rivaled the sun. Oceanus's rivers rose to meet Poseidon's waves, but the Trident's power turned the floods against them, drowning Titan strongholds in churning seas. Iapetus, the cunning spear of the Titans, struck with precision, but Hades's unseen strikes sowed chaos, his shadow weaving through their ranks like a specter of death. Crius and Coeus, their cosmic might bending the stars, faltered as the Hecatoncheires' boulders rained down each impact, a thunderclap that shattered their defenses. The Titanesses, Phoebe Mnemosyne, and even Rhea, torn by her love for her children, could only watch as the tide turned their spells and wisdom no match for the Olympians' relentless assault. Zeus led the charge, his thunderbolt a blazing symbol of the new age. Each bolt he hurled was a declaration, splitting the heavens and igniting the air with a fury that blinded even the gods. The sky became a sea of fire clouds boiling with the heat of his wrath, lightning arcing in patterns that seemed to write the prophecy of the Titan's fall. Poseidon's trident struck the earth, sending quakes that split the ground beneath Othrys, the tremors merging with the Hecatoncheires' barrage to create a cacophony of destruction. Hades, invisible under his helm, wove through the fray, his strikes precise and devastating, each blow a reminder of the underworld's silent power. Hera's commands cut through the chaos, her voice a thread that bound the Olympians' efforts, directing their attacks with a clarity that turned their passion into precision. Demeter's vines surged from the broken earth, binding Titans in their own defenses, while the Hecatoncheires boulders fell like meteors, their 100 hands a relentless storm that crushed all resistance. The battlefield was a maelstrom, the air thick with the scent of scorched earth and the ichor of wounded gods. The Hecatoncheires, their forms towering over the fray, moved with a rhythm that defied comprehension, their hands tearing stone from the earth and hurling it with a force that reshaped the landscape. Cronus's roars echoed like thunder, his boulders flattening Titan fortifications. Briareus's arms worked in a blur, each stone a missile that broke the Titan's resolve. Gaia's, his 50 heads scanning the battlefield, targeted the strongest Titan warriors, his barrage a chaos that no defense could withstand. The Olympians, amplified by the Cyclopes' weapons, fought with a unity that the Titans could not match. Zeus's lightning illuminated their path. Poseidon's quakes opened the earth, and Hades's shadows struck fear into their hearts. The war, so long a stalemate, now surged toward its climax, the Olympians' combined might, overwhelming the ancient power of their foes. The Titans, their golden halls crumbling under the assault, began to falter. Cronus, his face etched with rage and desperation, swung his sickle with a ferocity born of fear, but the Olympians' onslaught was unrelenting. Hyperion's light dimmed his flames, extinguished by Zeus's storms. Oceanus's rivers, once a force of nature, were turned back by Poseidon's tides. Iapetus, his cunning, no match for Hera's strategies, stumbled as Hades's shadow strikes found their mark. The Titanesses, their spells faltering, could only watch as their kin fell, their power waning under the weight of the Olympians' fury. The Hecatoncheires boulders continued to rain, each impact a blow to the Titans' pride, their chaos, a force that shattered the old order. The battlefield, once a place of balance, now tilted decisively in the Olympians' favor, the cosmos itself seeming to align with their cause. The final assault was a symphony of divine power, each Olympian a note in a chorus that sang of rebellion and renewal. Zeus, his thunderbolt raised, stood as the storm's heart, his lightning a promise of victory. Poseidon's trident shook the earth, his waves a tide that swept away resistance. Hades's helm made him a phantom, his strikes sowing terror in the Titans' ranks. Hera's voice, steady and commanding, guided their efforts, while Demeter's earthbound power rooted their resolve. The Hecatoncheires, their chaos unleashed, were the crescendo, their boulders a storm that broke the Titan's will. The sky burned, the earth quaked, and the heavens roared, the Titanomachy reaching its peak as the Olympians pressed their advantage. The stage was set for the final confrontation, the moment when Zeus would face his father, the prophecy of Cronus's fall drawing near in a blaze of fire and lightning. In the final confrontation, Zeus faced his own father, and with a fateful cast of his thunderbolt, he struck down Cronus, fulfilling the prophecy that had long haunted the cosmos. The battlefield, a ravaged plain between the peaks of Olympus and Othrys, lay shrouded in the smoke of divine war, the air thick with the scent of scorched earth and the ichor of fallen gods. The Olympians, bolstered by the Cyclopes' weapons and the Hecatoncheires' chaos, had pushed the Titans to the brink, their golden halls on Othrys crumbling under the relentless assault. Zeus stood at the heart of the fray, his thunderbolt blazing like a captured star, its light cutting through the haze of battle. His siblings fought alongside him, Poseidon's trident shaking the earth, Hades's helm weaving shadows of terror, Hera's commands binding their efforts, and Demeter's vines ensnaring the last of the Titan resistance. The Hecatoncheires, their 100 hands hurling boulders, had broken the Titans' formations, leaving Cronus exposed, his sickle gleaming with desperate fury. The sky churned a sea of fire and lightning as Zeus stepped forward, his eyes locked on his father, the moment of destiny at hand. Cronus, the Titan king, stood atop a shattered ridge, his massive form a monument to the old order. His face, once stern and unyielding, was now etched with the strain of a decade's war and the betrayal of his children. The sickle in his hand, the weapon that had felled Uranus, gleamed with a cruel light, its edge sharp with the memory of his own rebellion. Yet the prophecy that had driven him to devour his offspring now loomed its shadow, a weight he could not escape. Zeus, his youngest son, stood before him, no longer the hidden child of Mount Ida, but a god of storm and power, his thunderbolt a symbol of the new age. The air between them crackled, charged with the tension of a father and son bound by blood and betrayal. The other Titans, Hyperion, Iapetus, Oceanus, and their kin, faltered in the distance, their strength broken by the Olympians' onslaught, their eyes fixed on the duel that would decide the fate of the cosmos. Zeus spoke, his voice a low rumble that echoed like thunder across the battlefield. "Father," he said, the word heavy with both reverence and defiance, "your time is over. The chains you forged will bind you now." Cronus's eyes blazed, his grip tightening on the sickle, his voice a snarl that shook the earth. "You are but a spark boy," he roared, "and I am the fire that forged the world." He lunged his sickle, slashing through the air, a crescent of destruction aimed for Zeus's heart. But Zeus was no mere god. He was the storm, the lightning, the inevitable force of prophecy. He dodged with the grace of a tempest, his thunderbolt raised its energy, surging like a river of light. The battlefield fell silent, the Olympians and Titans pausing, their breaths held, as father and son clashed, the cosmos itself, watching the moment that would end an era. The duel was a storm of divine power, each strike a cataclysm that reshaped the world. Cronus's sickle carved arcs of raw energy, each swing a reminder of the Titan's ancient might. Zeus countered with the thunderbolt, its bolts splitting the sky, their light searing the earth. The two gods moved as if in a dance, their movements a blend of fury and precision, their power shaking the heavens. Cronus's blows were heavy, each strike a testament to the paranoia and strength that had kept him king. But Zeus was faster, his youth a fire that burned brighter than his father's rage. He wove through the sickle's arcs, his thunderbolt striking with a force that cracked the ridge beneath Cronus's feet. Lightning illuminated the Titan king's face, revealing a flicker of doubt, a crack in the armor of his certainty. The prophecy whispered by Gaia echoed in the air, its words a chain that bound Cronus to his fate. The Olympians watched, their hearts pounding with the weight of the moment. Poseidon's trident trembled in his grip, the seas roaring in the distance. Hades, cloaked in shadow, stood ready, his presence a silent promise of support. Hera's eyes, sharp and unyielding, followed every move, her strategies poised to adapt. Demeter's vines pulsed with the earth's rhythm, while Hestia's hearth, though distant, burned brighter, as if fueling Zeus's resolve. The Hecatoncheires, their boulders momentarily stilled, loomed like sentinels, their 100 eyes fixed on the duel. The Titans, their ranks broken, could only watch as their king faced his son, their power waning with each clash. The battlefield, scarred and smoking, was a canvas for this final act, the ground trembling as Zeus raised his thunderbolt for the decisive strike. With a roar that shook the heavens, Zeus hurled the thunderbolt, its light a spear that pierced the heart of the storm. The bolt struck Cronus, its energy coursing through his divine form, a blaze of power that illuminated the Titan's fall. Cronus staggered, his sickle slipping from his grasp, his body collapsing under the weight of prophecy fulfilled. The earth quaked, the sky burned, and the cosmos itself seemed to sigh as the Titan king fell. His reign ended by the sun he had sought to destroy. Zeus stood over his father, his thunderbolt still glowing, his breath heavy but steady. The Olympians roared in triumph, their voices a chorus that echoed across the plains, while the Titans, their spirit broken, bowed their heads in defeat. The prophecy long a shadow over Cronus's throne was fulfilled, the old order shattered by the storm of a new age. The fall of Cronus was both tragic and inevitable, a moment that closed one cycle of violence and opened another of divine rule. Zeus, his eyes heavy with the weight of his act, turned to his siblings, their faces a mixture of awe and resolve. The battlefield, once a place of endless struggle, now lay quiet, the air clearing as the storm subsided. The Olympians had won their unity, and the gifts of their allies, the Cyclopes' weapons, and the Hecatoncheires' chaos, proving stronger than the Titans' ancient might. The stage was set for the aftermath, the binding of the defeated Titans, and the establishment of a new order, as the cosmos prepared to embrace the rule of the Olympian gods. The defeated Titans were bound in chains and cast down into the abyss of Tartarus, where they would be guarded for eternity by the very beings they once feared and imprisoned. The battlefield, once a maelstrom of fire and chaos, now lay silent, its scarred plains a testament to the Titanomachy's end. Zeus stood amidst the wreckage, his thunderbolt still warm in his hand, its light dimming as the storm of war subsided. His siblings gathered around him, Poseidon, his trident planted in the earth, Hades, his helm of darkness casting faint shadows, Hera, her eyes sharp with the weight of victory, Demeter, her presence grounding the moment, and Hestia, her hearth's warmth, a distant beacon on Olympus. The Hecatoncheires, their 100 hands, now still loomed like sentinels, their colossal forms a reminder of the chaos that had turned the tide. The Titans, their golden halls on Mount Othrys reduced to rubble, stood defeated, their heads bowed under the weight of their foe. Cronus, the once mighty Titan king, knelt in the dust, his sickle broken, his eyes hollow, with the realization of prophecy fulfilled. The air was heavy, the cosmos holding its breath as the Olympians prepared to deliver justice to their vanquished foes. The task of binding the Titans was both a necessity and a ritual, a closing of the cycle that had begun with Cronus's betrayal of his own father, Uranos. Zeus, his voice resonant with authority, commanded the Hecatoncheires to forge chains from the same primal forces that had shaped the cosmos. Cottus, Briareus, and Gaius set to work, their 100 hands moving with a precision that belied their chaotic nature. The chains forged in the fires of Tartarus, and tempered by the Cyclopes' skill, gleamed with an otherworldly light, their links unbreakable, their weight a symbol of the Titans' crimes. The Olympians watched, their faces a mixture of resolve and solemnity, as the Titans were bound one by one. Hyperion, his light extinguished, struggled briefly, his flames flickering in vain against the chain's cold grip. Oceanus, his rivers stilled, bowed his head as the links encircled him, his power reduced to a whisper. Iapetus, the cunning spear, glared with defiance, but even his strength could not resist the Hecatoncheires' might. Crius Coius and the Titanesses. Phoebe Mnemosyne and others followed, their ancient power no match for the new order. The procession to Tartarus was a somber march, the defeated Titans led through the scarred earth to the chasm that had once been their prisoner's cage. Zeus led the way, his thunderbolt a silent reminder of the power that had felled Cronus. Poseidon and Hades flanked the procession, their weapons ready, their presence a warning to any who might resist. Hera's gaze was unyielding, her strategies now turned to ensuring the Titan's imprisonment would endure. Demeter's touch steadied the earth, her vines guiding the path to the abyss, while Hestia's hearth, though distant, burned as a symbol of the new home the Olympians would build. The Hecatoncheires, their task as jailers now begun, drove the Titans forward, their 100 hands a relentless force. The air grew colder as they approached Tartarus, the darkness of the abyss swallowing the light, its depths a void that echoed with the memory of the Titans' own cruelty. The Titans, once lords of the cosmos, now walked as prisoners, their steps heavy with the weight of their defeat. Tartarus opened before them, its gates yawning like the mouth of oblivion. The Hecatoncheires, once captives of this very prison, now stood as its guardians, their presence a poetic justice that resonated through the cosmos. Zeus, his voice steady but grave, spoke the sentence that would bind the Titans for eternity. "You who ruled by fear," he said, "will know the chains you forged for others." With a gesture, he commanded the Hecatoncheires to cast the Titans into the abyss. One by one they were hurled into the darkness, their cries swallowed by the void. Cronus, the last to fall, met Zeus's gaze, a flicker of something, regret perhaps, or defiance passing through his eyes, before he was consumed by the shadows. The gates of Tartarus closed with a sound, like the sealing of fate, the Hecatoncheires taking their place as eternal sentinels, their 100 hands ready to crush any who might seek escape. Among the Titans, one fate stood apart, Atlas, son of Iapetus, whose strength and leadership had bolstered the Titan cause. Zeus, recognizing his power, spared him the abyss, but imposed a punishment as enduring as Tartarus itself. Atlas, Zeus, declared, his voice echoing across the heavens, "You will bear the weight of the sky, a burden, to remind the world of the Titan's fall." The Olympians watched as Atlas was led to the edge of the world where the heavens met the earth. There he was bound not in chains, but in duty, his shoulders forced to hold the celestial vault for eternity. His groans, faint but constant, became a whisper in the wind, a reminder of the price of rebellion against the new order. The other Titans, sealed in Tartarus, would know no such visibility, their names fading into the shadows of history. The aftermath of the war was a moment of quiet reflection for the Olympians. The battlefield now still bore the scars of their struggle, mountains, shattered rivers, rerouted the earth itself, reshaped by the fury of gods. Zeus and his siblings returned to Olympus, their steps heavy with the weight of victory. Hestia's hearth burned brighter, a symbol of the home they had fought to create. Hera's eyes turned to the future, her mind already weaving plans for the new order. Poseidon and Hades, their weapons still in hand, stood ready to defend their hard-won dominion. Demeter's touch brought life back to the scarred earth, a promise of renewal. The cosmos, once torn by war, now settled into a fragile peace, its balance restored by the Olympians' triumph. The binding of the Titans was not just a punishment, but a foundation, a line drawn between the old world and the new. The transition from the fall of Cronus to this moment of judgment was seamless, the Olympians' victory solidified by the imprisonment of their foes. The Hecatoncheires, once prisoners, now stood as guardians, their loyalty to Zeus, a bond forged in the fires of Tartarus. The cosmos, watching in silence, accepted the new order, its stars aligning with the Olympians' rule. The stage was set for the division of the world, the establishment of a new era under the gods of Olympus, as the echoes of the Titanomachy faded into legend. When the dust of war finally settled, the three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, divided the world amongst themselves, establishing a new order from glorious Mount Olympus, and the age of the Olympian gods officially began. The scarred plains between Olympus and Othrys, once a battlefield of fire and chaos, now lay quiet, the earth breathing softly under the weight of a new dawn. The Titans bound in the abyss of Tartarus were a fading echo, their golden halls reduced to ruins, their power sealed away by the Hecatoncheires' unyielding watch. Zeus stood atop Olympus, his thunderbolt at rest, its light softened by the glow of victory. Beside him stood Poseidon, his trident planted in the earth, the sea's restless energy calmed for the moment. Hades, his helm of darkness casting faint shadows, gazed into the distance, his thoughts already turning to the underworld. Their sisters, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, stood nearby, their presence a foundation for the new order, their faces radiant with the promise of a world reborn. The air was crisp, the sky clear, as if the cosmos itself rejoiced in the end of the Titanomachy and the rise of the Olympian reign. The division of the world was a solemn act, a ritual that would define the roles of the gods and the shape of the cosmos. Zeus, as the leader who had felled Cronus, called his brothers to the peak of Olympus, where Hestia's hearth burned as a symbol of their unity. The fire's warmth bathed them in light, its flames dancing as if Gaia herself bore witness to their pact. The brothers, their bond forged in the crucible of war, agreed to divide the realms of existence, ensuring balance in the new age. They drew lots, a method as ancient as the cosmos, to determine their dominions. The lots were cast, and the heavens, the seas, and the underworld were apportioned, each brother accepting his role with the gravity of gods, who knew the weight of their responsibility. The earth, vast and vibrant, would remain a shared domain, its care entrusted to all the Olympians, with Demeter's touch to nurture its life and Hera's wisdom to guide its order. Zeus drew the heavens his rightful place as the storm god and leader of the rebellion. The sky, vast and boundless, stretched before him, its clouds parting to reveal a canvas of stars that shimmered with his authority. He would rule from Olympus, its peaks, a throne from which he could survey the world, his thunderbolt, a symbol of justice and power. His voice, a rumble of thunder, would echo across the heavens, guiding the gods and mortals alike. Poseidon, his eyes gleaming with the restlessness of the seas, claimed the oceans as his domain. The trident, still warm from battle, pulsed with the rhythm of waves, its tines a promise to command the tides and guard the waters that encircled the earth. His laughter, deep and resonant, rolled like a storm across the seas, a reminder of his power to both nurture and destroy. Hades, ever silent, accepted the underworld, his helm of darkness, a fitting crown for the realm of shadows. The depths of Tartarus and the fields of Elysium would fall under his sway, his presence a quiet force that balanced life and death. The sisters, though not part of the division, played their own vital roles in the new order. Hera, her gaze sharp and regal, took her place as queen of the gods, her wisdom and authority second only to Zeus. She would oversee the bonds of family and the sanctity of order, her strategies now turned to building a divine court that would endure. Demeter, her connection to the earth unbroken, vowed to nurture the fields and forests, her power ensuring the world's bounty for gods and mortals alike. Hestia, the gentle heart of the Olympians, tended the sacred hearth, her fire a symbol of home and unity that would bind the gods together. The Olympians, their roles defined, stood as a pantheon, their unity a strength that the Titans had lacked. The cosmos, once torn by war, now hummed with the harmony of their rule, its balance restored by the gods who had fought for its future. The mortal world, though distant, felt the shift. Rivers flowed smoothly once more, their courses no longer disrupted by divine quakes. The seasons, guided by Demeter's hand, began to turn with regularity, bringing life to the scarred earth. Mortals, their prayers rising to the new gods, whispered of Olympus, their stories weaving the Titanomachy into legend. The Olympians, though, focused on their divine duties, cast their gaze downward, their rule a promise of protection and order for the fledgling mortal race. Zeus, from his throne in the heavens, saw the potential for a world where gods and mortals could coexist, their fates intertwined. Poseidon's seas cradled the ships of early explorers, while Hades's underworld offered a place for souls to rest its shadows, no longer a place of fear, but of balance. The establishment of the new order was not without its challenges. The Olympians, though victorious, bore the scars of their struggle, their unity tested by the weight of their new roles. Zeus, as king, faced the burden of leadership, his thunderbolt a reminder of the power he wielded and the justice he must uphold. Poseidon's restless spirit chafed at times his seas, a reflection of his untamed nature. Hades, in the solitude of the underworld, carried the weight of a realm unseen by his siblings, his silence a shield against the isolation of his duty. Yet the siblings' bond, forged in the fires of war, held strong their trust in each other, a foundation that would endure. Hestia's hearth burned at the heart of Olympus, a constant reminder of the home they had fought for its warmth, a promise of peace. The transition from the Titans' imprisonment to this moment of cosmic division was seamless, the Olympians' victory solidified by the establishment of their rule. The age of the Olympian gods had begun its dawn, marked by the light of Zeus's sky, the rhythm of Poseidon's seas, and the shadow of Hades's underworld. The cosmos, once a battlefield, now stood as a realm of order, its future shaped by the gods who had dared to challenge the old ways. The stories of their rule, their triumphs, and their struggles would echo through the ages, a testament to the war that had birthed a new world from the ashes of the old. And so the thunder fades and the fires of war dim to quiet embers. The Titans sleep in the shadows of Tartarus, and the world at last is still. On Mount Olympus, the young gods watch over a new age, born not from conquest, but from balance restored. Let the weight of ancient battles drift away now like mist on a mountain breeze. Thank you for dreaming with us on Sleep Stories TV. If this tale brought you peace, feel free to subscribe and ring the bell. And in the silence of night, may the stars whisper stories that gently guide your rest.